Good morning, everybody. How's it going today? Good, good, good. Hey, it's great to have you guys here. It's great that I'm here with you. I appreciate Chad preaching last week and filling in for me. I hurt my back. Many of you guys know that. And I appreciate all the prayers and the conversations of concern that you guys have for me. I was basically doing something that I probably shouldn't have been doing, and I paid the price for it. Much better today, and we're going to get into Psalm 42, and we're going to talk today about being downcast. And the reason we're going to talk about being downcast is because if you guys are like me, and probably if you're a human being, you share some similarities with me. The thing is that it's one thing to feel good about following Jesus and to feel motivated to following Jesus during certain parts of your life, but other times you're not feeling that, right? You're either upset or you're angry or you're sad, you're depressed, you're downcast. The problem is that our emotions a lot of times make it difficult for us to be more like Jesus. And I don't know if you guys ever struggle with that, but I think it's a pretty common thing for us. And so today we're going to talk about being downcast and the importance of following Jesus and how to follow Jesus when you're in that part of your life. Maybe things haven't been going so well for one reason or another. You've been facing challenges. Whatever the issue is, when you're downcast, how are we going to be more like Jesus? And we're going to look at Psalm chapter 42 today, verses 5 through 10. And I encourage you to read the whole psalm at some point today or during the week, so that you can get a picture of kind of the whole part of the psalm, because it's a really fascinating psalm. Before we get into the text today, I want to talk a little bit about something that I saw happen this last week, and I don't know if you guys noticed it. So there's a celebrity named Russell Brand, and I don't know if you are familiar with him, heard of him. And he's a comedian, he's an actor, and he was known for kind of being a hippie-esque kind of free spirit, let's say. Kind of was dabbling in all kinds of different religions and was into all kinds of different religions, and but also lived, according to him, a pretty hedonistic life for a good deal of his time here on earth. And something happened in the last year, and he became a Christian. He got baptized, and I'm not here I don't know him personally. I'm not here to tell you whether it's just another one of those celebrity phases or whether it's a true turning point in his life, because I don't know him. All I can do is see the actions and comment on those things. One of the things that happened, though, this last week, and you might have heard about this, is that there was a picture that was circulating of him participating in a baptism, baptizing one of his friends. And the problem was he was in his underwears, his whitey-tighties, in the picture. And all of a sudden, the internet erupted over this for many different reasons. I don't know if what was, in his heart. I know what he said about it, though. And there was a lot of criticism. Why we're doing this is disrespectful. And he said, hey, I understand those sentiments and those concerns. He said the thing is that I had the clothes that I had on. I didn't want to get them wet. Because I would have had to been wet in them the next, for the rest of the day. And so, I didn't want to not baptize my friend. He wanted to get baptized. I'd been sharing the gospel with him. And so I, did this. And he goes, I didn't expect this picture to get out. It was a friend of the guy who was getting baptized took this picture. And, here we are. Everything's on the internet these days. And I thought about the interesting aspects of this. How many of you guys find evangelism to be difficult? Let's be honest. Is evangelism difficult? It is. Does it make you nervous? Does it? Let me ask you this, and let's just be honest with each other. Do you ever feel like the call to evangelism is kind of a burden? Is anybody else with me? And if you don't want to raise your hand, that's fine. But you can mentally either register with that or not. But the thing is I think for a lot of us, we feel that kind of there's a burdensome nature to this call of needing to evangelize to people. We get nervous. What if I say the right thing? What if I misrepresent the faith? What if I mess this up? What if I, and we think about a lot of those things. And if you had to add on to that, having a picture of you baptizing somebody while you're wearing your underwear go all over the internet, would that dissuade you at all? How many, let's say, if evangelizing somebody came with the knowledge that you were going to have to baptize that person in your underwear and that picture was going to go all over the world on the internet, would that be an extra burden? Raise your hand if that would be an extra burden for you. Okay, quite a few of you, right? The thing that, you can look at this a couple of different ways, and people have, and that's fine. But you can look at it as, here's a guy who was just trying to get attention. Or you can look at it as, here's the guy who wanted to baptize his friend so bad that he was willing to strip down to his underwear, and even when the picture got taken and sent out over the internet, you know what he did? Just at the end of the week, he baptized another one of his friends. And he goes, hey, I came prepared. I'm wearing swim trunks. I came prepared this time. And so I think, hey, that's pretty cool that he didn't let it stop him. The thing is that, sometimes following God is a burden. And so let's look at Psalm 42, and let's look at somebody who's feeling a burden, and look at this psalm that's a praise to God. In Psalm 42, verse 5 through 10, it says, "Why are you cast down, O my soul? And why are you in turmoil within me? Hope in God, for I shall again praise him, my salvation and my God. My soul is cast down within me, therefore I remember you from the land of Jordan and of Hermon, from Mount Mizar. Deep calls to deep. At the roar of your waterfalls, all your breakers and your waves have gone over me. By day the Lord commands his steadfast love, and at night his song is with me, a prayer to the God of my life. I say to God, my rock, why have you forgotten me? Why do I go mourning because of the oppression of the enemy? As with a deadly wound in my bones, my adversaries taunt me, while they say to me all day long, where is your God? So in looking at this passage, we need to look at when we're feeling like this, when we're feeling the burden of following Jesus, when we're feeling the burden of our life, when it just seems like so much work and effort to follow Jesus, to be more like him, what do we do? We're going to look at three aspects of this. And by no means is this going to be an exhaustive look at this psalm, because there is so much here, but we're going to look at three aspects of it. First of all, why are we so downcast? We need to understand that. Secondly, we have questions, and let's talk about those questions. And thirdly, we're going to talk about drawing near. So let's look at this today, and let's maybe see some ways that we can get through these times in our lives. So let's talk about why so downcast. When we look at why so downcast, we have to understand the background, the history of this. Now, if you guys have opened your Bibles and are looking at that passage, it tells us who the author is. In the Psalms, some Psalms we don't know who wrote them, and some Psalms the author is listed. A lot of times the Psalms were written by David, but it's interesting, in the first book, they're pretty much all written by David, but then as it goes on, we get some more authors thrown in here. Does anybody see in their Bible who wrote this Psalm? Does anybody see that? Who is it? What's that? Yeah, it's a maskil. That's a type of psalm, and it's from the sons of who? The sons of Korah, right? Now that's interesting, and the thing is that when we read the psalm like this, it's who wrote it is going to be really important, right? Who wrote it is going to be, we need to understand this author. Now, sometimes when David wrote it, when David in Psalm 51, when he was repenting over Bathsheba, you need to know the story of David to really get the full picture of the psalm. And here it's kind of like that too, because the psalmist is saying, why are you so downcast? And he's putting his hope in God. And if you know the story, then it makes a lot more sense. So the thing is that who are the sons of Korah? Well, the thing is that it's written there. They're known as the sons of Korah. This is kind of their identity. And you think, well, gosh, man, Korah must have been a great man for his descendants to say, I am a son of Korah, right? If your father was Abraham Lincoln, you'd be like, I'm one of the sons of Abraham Lincoln. Right? If your father was maybe Martin Luther King Jr., you would say, I am the son of Martin Luther. You know what I'm saying? Like these people who we view highly, you carry on that name and you want to be associated with them. So who are the sons of Korah? Well, when we start looking at this, we start going back into history. And when Israel left Egypt and they were in the wilderness and God was setting up the worship that they were to do in the tabernacle, God set apart the tribe of Levi as the ones who would serve him in the things that were associated with the tabernacle. And the thing that's interesting about that is that Levi had 3 sons. So there are basically three branches of the tribe of Levi. And his sons were Gershon, Merari, and Kohath. And Gershon, the Gershonites, the descendants of Gershon, their responsibility in the worship of God was the tabernacle and the tent and the things that were associated around the altar outside in the area where they did the sacrifices. And so what happened is that when Israel went from place to place, they had to break down that tent, and they had to load that tent and all the stuff on carts, and they had to follow God wherever he was leading, and then they had to set that tent up. How many of you guys have gone camping? We did some camping this weekend, some of the men's ministry stuff. You guys have gone camping? You know, the thing is that setting up a tent is easy these days compared to the way it was back then, right? And so their job, they had a hard job, but they get to load this tent onto carts and they can take it. Well, then there was Merari, and the Merarites, their job was the frames and the poles and all that kind of stuff that held the tent up. And so they had to do that. And they could load that on carts, and then they could take those carts and they could follow God as the pillar of fire and the pillar of smoke moved on, and they had the people of Israel had to follow. They could put those things in carts. And then there were the Kohathites. And their responsibility, you see, what's interesting is it gets more and more in glory. The Kohathites, their job was the ark and the table and the lampstand and the altars. Now, the thing is that it gets more and more in glory. Like these people are getting closer and closer to the glory of God, because remember that the Ark of the Covenant and the mercy seat, that's where God's glory dwelled. And so when you have responsibility for the Ark of the Covenant, well, that's a great responsibility. Like this is prestigious, right? It's an honor. But this honor comes with a burden. Remember that the biblical word for glory in the Old Testament, the Hebrew word has to do with weight. There is a weight to the responsibility. There's a weight to the glory that the Kohathites are involved in. And that weight is this: those things cannot be set on a cart. They have to be carried. And so the Kohathites, they had to put poles through these pieces of furniture. And remember that they were made out of stuff like bronze and gold. These things were heavy, and they had to put that load on their shoulders, and they had to walk when they followed God. You see, the other families, they could put their stuff on carts because that stuff wasn't as important. But for these things, it could only be borne by a person, and there's a reason for that. And the reason is that this ark was the place where God's glory dwelled, and all the things in the temple, the tabernacle, it all was symbolic, and it was symbolic of the fact that God's presence dwells in a human being. And so when you carry these things of this glory, you can't just put them on a cart, because God's glory is not found in a cart. God's glory is found in a human being. But when you have the job of carrying that glory, that gets heavy. And that's what these guys had to do. But here's the other thing that made their job very difficult. You see, they were close to the glory, but they weren't really right there, because when they carried these objects were covered. These objects were covered up. Because, you know, the thing is that only the priest could see the things that were in the holy place, and only the high priest could ever see the Ark of the Covenant where the glory of God dwelled, and he could only do that on the Day of Atonement. He only did that once a year, and nobody else in all of Israel ever saw these things. And so they had the burden of carrying these things, but they never got the honor of seeing these things. Because that honor was reserved for one family within the Kohathites, and that was Aaron and his sons. They were the priesthood. Korah, remember we started this looking at who are the sons of Korah. Korah was a Kohathite, but he was not one of the sons of Aaron. So he was one of the people who would carry the burden of this but not be able to see it. And so you think, well, of course that these sons of Korah, they were wearing the name of their father because he was so prestigious as to be able to at least carry these objects of glory, the glory of God. That's why they carry his name, and you'd be wrong about that. Because one of the things that we have to understand is that when you have to carry the burden of glory, but you don't get to be in the presence of that glory, that becomes a burden that's too much to bear. And the problem is that as Christians, a lot of us, that's the way that we live. We live with the burden of glory, but we're never in the presence of glory. And when you live in that place where you have to carry that burden of glory, but you're never in the presence of glory, you will be downcast. Your soul will be downcast. You will feel the burden. You will feel the weight of that. I can't tell you growing up how many times I was with Christians that being a Christian for them was nothing but a burden. Well, now I have to do this and I have to avoid that, and I can't do this and I have to do that. And I got to be down at the church on Saturday because it needs cleaning up. And man, I got to put myself on the list of people who need to, help in the nursery. And man, those kids cry. Right? Have you ever been there? Come on, let's be honest. We've been there. We've all been there. Well, how did this resolve itself? Well, in Numbers chapter 16, it comes to a head. And Korah leads a rebellion against Moses and Aaron. And he assembles 250 people to oppose them. And in verse 3, chapter 16, verse 3, it says, they assembled themselves together against Moses and against Aaron and said to them, you have gone too far, for all in the congregation are holy, every one of them, and the Lord is among them. Why then do you exalt yourselves above the assembly of the Lord? Korah leads a rebellion against Moses and Aaron. And Moses and Aaron said, you don't understand, here's the thing, this is actually an extra burden. Now it's true we get to be in the presence of the glory, but it's an extra burden. There's so many more things. Remember that some of Aaron's own sons don't do their job right and they're killed. The point for Moses and Aaron is this is the way that God has set it up. But Korah, he's so close to the glory, but he's not there yet. And he leads a rebellion to try to get there. You see, the thing is that that's what we do a lot. When we're right there, when we're close, when we're feeling the burden of the weight of carrying the glory, but we're not in the presence of glory, what happens a lot is we lead a rebellion. Service to God without proximity to God will always lead to burnout. And I can't stress that enough. Service to God without proximity to God will always lead to burnout. And when you burn out, you will lead a rebellion. It happens in churches all across America all the time. Where people in the congregation will lead a rebellion. Why? Because they've been serving and serving, and it's been a bigger and bigger burden, but because they haven't been close to God, the burden is all they've gotten out of it. In Matthew chapter 15, verse 7 through 9, it says, you hypocrites, well did Isaiah prophesy of you when he said, this people honors me with their lips, but their heart is far from me. That's the burden without the proximity. The burden is the honor God with your lips, to honor God with your service, to honor God with your actions, to honor God with the things that you do, to honor God with the things that you don't do, to honor all these things. But when your heart is far from Him, it says in verse 9, in vain do they worship me, teaching as doctrines the commandments of men. What is he saying? Is he saying that these people, because they were honoring God with their lips, but their hearts were far from him, they taught the doctrines of men. There was a revolution. There was a rebellion. That's what always happens. Service without proximity leads to burnout, and service without proximity also leads to pride. That's what leads to the rebellion. If the service that you're doing is not the result of your proximity to God, then your service will never be of glory to God. You're either going to serve God from the love of God, or eventually you're going to serve God from the love of self. And when you serve God from the love of self, this is the way that it ends. The heavy burden leads to exhaustion, or it leads to pride in your own strength. If it's pride in your own strength, then you are deceived about your condition. If it's exhaustion, you're seeing your condition clearly, but you're not close enough to God to see the answer. Well, what happens to Korah and his rebellion? In Numbers chapter 16, verse 31 through 33, it says, "And as soon as he had finished speaking all these words," so what happened is, Moses said, okay, we'll let God judge between us. If you guys all die a regular natural death, you get old, you die, if that all happens, then hey, I was wrong. But if you die in a completely unnatural way where the ground swallows you up, then I was right and you were wrong. And it says, as soon as he finished speaking all these words, the ground under them split apart. Verse 32 says, "And the earth opened up its mouth and swallowed them up with their households and all the people who belonged to Korah and all their goods. So they all that belonged to them went down alive into Sheol, and the earth closed over them, and they perished from the midst of the assembly." God judged Korah as a rebel, and he and his households went down. And you might say to yourself, well, then who are the sons of Korah? They all died. Here's something you have to understand. The Bible speaks a lot like we speak. Imagine seeing this. You're going to tell your friend what happened. Oh man, Korah and all his household, they went down into the pit. Now the thing is that, does that mean every single person went down to the pit? You see, that the way that we speak is often technically incomplete. And because that's the way that we speak, and everybody speaks like that, that's the way the Bible speaks. But the Bible actually is really interesting because if you dig deeper into the story, it tells you things that you need to know. In Numbers chapter 26, verse 10 and 11, it says, "And the earth opened up its mouth and swallowed them up together with Korah. When that company died, when the fire devoured 250 men, and they became a warning," verse 11, "but the sons of Korah did not die." You see, one of the things that's interesting is when we read those things, a lot of times people say, well, look how bloodthirsty God is. Look at God didn't spare anybody. Can you imagine those little kids dying? Well, they didn't do anything. Well, here's the thing. A lot of times, even though it says the whole household died, it's speaking the way that we speak. Their whole household died. Does that mean every single one of them died? No. What happened is, this is actually explaining to us a little further that these sons of Korah, these young kids, God spared them. He knows that they weren't leading the rebellion. So what happens? Well, they grow up and they have sons and daughters and families, and then they grow up. And then through history, what's interesting is you see that the sons of Korah continue on. You know, how many of you guys have heard of the prophet Samuel? Pretty amazing guy, right? He was a son of Korah. King David had expert warriors under his command that were some of the sons of Korah. What's interesting is that just because Korah led a rebellion doesn't mean that grace was not available to his family. You see, here's the thing. Many of you guys have come from rebellion. And it might have been rebellion in your family. It might have been rebellion in your friends, the people that you hung out with. It might have been rebellion in your own life. The question is the grace of God sufficient to cover that? And what we see in the Bible is that, yes, and the sons of Korah are proof. And the thing you might ask yourself is, well, why would the sons of Korah call themselves the sons of Korah if their father, Korah, was this rebel who defied God and defied Moses and went down to the grave because of that? Because they weren't interested in their own reputation, they were interested in the reputation of God. We are the sons of Korah. Our father died a rebel, but we draw near to God. The faithfulness of God is sufficient. The sons of Korah became known as great leaders in the music of the temple. And 11 of the Psalms are attributed to them. But what's interesting here is that you'll see in Psalm 42 they still get downcast. So let's look at the point number 2, got questions. So here's the thing that we need to understand. Korah dealt with his being downcast in his way. But the psalmist, the sons of Korah, are dealing with it in a different way. And this is what is so important to us and why the Bible is so rich, is because you get to choose. You can choose to deal with your downcast nature, your downcast feelings, your downcast persona, those emotions that get you down. You can deal with them when you're frustrated, when you're feeling the burden, when you're feeling like things aren't fair, when you feel like you can deal with it the way Korah did, or you can deal with it the way the sons of Korah did. Because this Psalm 42 is like a manual of how to deal with your downcast soul. If you go to this psalm over and over again, when your soul is downcast, you will find that it is a manual for how to turn that around. It's a manual for how to be more like Jesus, even in the midst of your struggles and your emotions. The first aspect of truth in dealing with being downcast is this: question your emotions. Question your emotions. You see, a lot of us never do that. Isn't it funny? And a lot of times when we read this, we miss out on the fact that this is a question. The sons of Korah are questioning their own emotions. Why are you downcast, O my soul? You don't just let your emotions get to rule you without being questioned. Who's in charge here? Who's in charge in your life? Are your emotions in charge of your life, or are you in charge of your life? Because if it's you, you need to rein those things in. If it's you, you better start asking some questions. If it's you, you better live up to the responsibility that God has given you to be the person who takes dominion over the things that are going on inside of them. At least start this way. Ask yourself some questions. Why are you downcast, oh my soul? Do you have a good reason for this? Now, the thing is, why do we need to ask our soul questions? God has given us emotions for a reason, right? He has. Our emotions put us in motion. That's why they're called emotions, right? You get angry, you do something about it. You get sad, you do something about it. You get happy, you do something about it, right? God's put those there for a reason, but you have to understand this, that we are, remember, priests in this world. We have our flesh and we have our spirit. We are, as priests, a bridge between the spiritual world and the physical world. We have our physical nature and we have our spiritual nature. And you know what's interesting is that God programmed this physical body to keep the physical side going. The physical side is about doing the things that get the physical side going, right? You're hungry, you eat. You're tired, you sleep, right? You're angry, you destroy that thing that you're angry about, right? Well, here's the thing. So we were up camping this week in Bear Canyon Lake, right? And you know what's interesting is Bear Canyon Lake is called Bear Canyon Lake because of bears. So as we're driving up there, there's a sign like right close to where we camped out that says, "Hey, there's bear activity here. Be warned." And it's not like one of those permanent signs. It's one of those signs that they put out when people have been seeing bears, they've been seeing bear activity, they've been interacting with bears. So they put that out to go, hey, you're warned, bears here, right? So here's the thing, if you're sitting there and your kid gets chased through your camp by a bear, you're going to feel some emotions about that, right? There's going to be something that wells up. You don't have to sit there and contemplate that, right? You don't have to say, well, the bear is a bear. He's got some rights in this world. My kid, let's face it, I'm not sure about that kid's future. That's not the way it works, does it? You don't sit there and analyze and draw diagrams. No, as soon as you see that, there is an anger that wells up inside of you, and you go and you take on that bear, no matter if it's with a rock or a stick or whatever you've got handy, you take it on. You don't think about it. You don't analyze it. You don't say, well, I could get hurt during this. You don't do any of that stuff. You go. Your emotions put you in action. Why? Because the body's job is to look out for the body. The Spirit's job is to look out for all of it. You see, this is bottom line programming, those emotions. But it has to be ruled over by something. And God has given you a spirit. There's a spirit dwelling within you, and the spirit is above the flesh. And the spirit's job is to rule over those emotions. And the first thing you have to do is start asking those emotions questions. Why are you downcast? Oh, my soul. In Romans chapter 8, verse 6, it says, for to set the mind on the flesh is death, but to set the mind on the spirit is life and peace. You're either going to be ruled over by your physical side, or you're going to be ruled over by your spiritual side. And most people who walk around this world are ruled over by their physical side. They've got it upside down. And when that happens, you're in for trouble. Are you tired? Are you tired of serving? Ask yourself why. Don't let that just rule over. Well, I'm tired, I better stop. I'm frustrated, I better get angry. I'm angry, I better tell somebody about it. I'm still angry, I better do something about it. I'm still angry, I better lead a rebellion. Ask yourself why. Are you sad? Why? Are you angry? Why? Are you happy? Why? Do these states of your emotions rule over you, or do you rule over them? And after you start asking yourself why, you're going to come up with some answers. And sometimes those answers aren't going to be very satisfying to you. Job asked a lot of questions to God. And the answers he got were not very satisfying. God didn't ever really ask or answer Job's question directly. And then when that happens, the next thing that happens in this psalm is the thing that you have to do. In verse 6 it says, my soul is cast down within me. Therefore, I remember you from the land of Jordan and Hermon and Mount Mizur. You know what's interesting? When you start asking those questions and you get answers that aren't satisfying, the thing that you have to do is start remembering your history. Where were you when God found you? Where were you when he asked you to follow? When Jesus said, come follow me, be my disciple, where were you when he found you? And where are you now? Remember your past. See, that's what the psalmist is doing. The psalmist is remembering the past and saying, look, I remember all the things that God did for me. I remember all the times that God saved me. I remember all the times that God was faithful in my life. I remember all of those things. And when you remember those things, you know what? You start developing a trust that can deal with unsatisfying answers. You can start developing a trust. Here's the thing that's interesting, is if God never gave us unsatisfying answers, we would never trust him. You see, a lot of us say to God, God, if you give me a satisfying answer, I'll trust you. And that's a lie. That is a lie. You will not. You will only trust in your appreciation of the answer. You will only trust in your assessment of the answer. You will only trust in the fact that you've deemed the answer good enough. You're really only trusting in your own judgment. You see, here's the thing. God says, hey, you know what? You're going to carry this ark, but you're never going to see it. And if you say why, and God gives you an answer, and you deem it satisfying, then you'll trust Him. You're not trusting in God, you're trusting in your own understanding. And the Bible tells us not to lean on your own understanding. And the only way to avoid doing that is to get an unsatisfying answer and to trust in Him anyway. Well, how do we do that? Well, we do that by looking back over our history and saying, God was sufficient in all these times in my life. I can trust that He'll be sufficient now. Then you're starting to trust in God, and you're not leaning on your own understanding. But until you get that, you won't be there. God has to put you in a place of trust, and in a place of trust, guess what? You have to trust Him. But that's not the only thing the psalmist does here. Because right after he says, why are you so downcast? Why is there turmoil within me? He says, hope in God, for I shall praise Him, my salvation and my God. You see, not only does the psalmist look at his past, but he also looks at his future. He knows what his future is in Jesus. He knows what his future is because of the grace of God. The flesh lives for the moment, but the Spirit is the master of all time. The Spirit is the master of all time. You see, the Spirit can redeem the past. It can give us a new future. And when we start to trust in God and we see the future that He has for us and we desire that future, we say, you know what? I can live with the ambiguity of my time. I can live with the fact that my emotions are not in my alignment right now. I can live with the fact that I'm really downcast now, but I know in the future that God will put me in a place of blessing. Where has my life come and where is my hope? What has given me life to the full? What will give me life to the full in the future? We need to see that history. Well, the last thing that we can take from this is drawing near to God. He says in verse 7 through 10, deep calls to deep at the roar of your waterfalls. All your breakers and your waves have gone over me. By day the Lord commands His steadfast love, and at night His song is with me, a prayer to the God of my life. I say to my rock, my God, why have you forgotten me? Why do I go mourning because of the oppression of my enemy? As with a deadly wound in my bones, my adversaries taunt me, while they say to me all day long, where is your God? The psalmist is drawing near to God. It's recognizing that even though the enemies have put a wound in him and they've asked the question, where is your God? And that question, where is your God? It's important that we put these things together. You see, our enemies can wound us physically, but when they ask, where is your God? They're trying to wound us spiritually. But what the psalmist is doing and the way that the psalm resolves is that his trust is in God. He is drawn near to Him. Remember in John 17:3, Jesus says, this is eternal life, that they know you, the only true God, and Jesus Christ whom you have sent. This is eternal life. In John 17, verse 20 and 21, it says, I do not ask for these only, but also for those who will believe in me through their word, that they may all be one, just as you, Father, are in me and I in you, so that they also may be in us. The way that Jesus' relationship is with the Father is exactly the way He wants our relationship to be. So here's the thing to understand. How did Jesus do all the things that He did? Because they came out of a personal relationship of love with the Father. The wound and the question. The wound strikes at the flesh. The question strikes at the spirit. Where is your God? The question is, what is your answer to that? When the world asks you, where is your God? What is your answer to that? Is the answer, He's right here with me? He is with me all through the night. He is with me all through the day. He is with me in the midst of my emotions being downcast. He is with me wherever I go. There is no valley too deep. There is no ocean floor too remote that the love of God is not there with me. The love of God, no matter where I go in this earth, no matter what I experience, no matter how dark things are, the love of God is there with me. If that is your answer, you will come out of your soul being downcast. And when you come out of that, you will be stronger than you were before. We talk a lot about believing, belonging, becoming here. Do you believe the burden of your service, your downcast soul? Do you believe that this is for your blessing? Do you believe that the presence of God can pull you out? Can you answer the question, where is your God? That's the thing you have to believe. God is here with me. I only have to reach out. Do you belong to Him in a covenant? Does this show in your life? Does it show in the way that you deal with your emotions? And finally, do you become close to Him? The Bible tells us that He stands at the door and He knocks. He wants to be with us. In the midst of being downcast, Jesus wants to be with you. He wants to sit down. He wants to have a meal. He wants to have fellowship. He wants to have a relationship. Are you becoming the person who opens the door and says yes to Him?
Thanks for joining our worship service today. Please follow us on our Facebook page, where you can let us know about any needs or prayer requests you may have and keep up with the latest church news and events. You can also check out all of our past lessons and other videos by visiting our YouTube channel. At First Christian Church, we strive to be the presence of Christ in the world by helping others to believe in God's love for them, to belong to His church, and to become like Christ in their lives. If you would like to support us in our ministry, you may do so by giving online through our website at www.fcct.org or by mailing checks to the church. Have a great week.